Hello, and welcome to Connecting the Dots using DEC recommended practices to meet early childhood indicators. We're so excited that you are here today. My name is Melissa Griffin, and I'm the Technical Assistance Coordinator for South Carolina Partnerships for Inclusion. I have here with me today, Carrie Cannengeiser, Program Director.
Hey, everyone.
Ladrika Jones, Technical Assistant Specialist.
Hi.
And Dana Bennett, Technical Assistant Specialist.
Hello there.
So we'd love to know more about you. In the chat box, please add your name, your role, and your district or location. Hi, Erica. Hey, Sherry. Hello. We're so glad you guys could join us.
On a Monday, too, a Monday afternoon. Thank you, everybody.
All right. Welcome, welcome. Well, let's talk a little bit about today's agenda. The objective for today is to provide you with an overview of DEC recommended practices and the early childhood indicators. In this series, we'll take a deep dive into how incorporating these practices into your preschools can organically result in improved early childhood outcomes for your students. Just a few housekeeping items before we get started. First being that today's webinar is being recorded, so we will make it available on our YouTube page so that you can revisit the information or share it with colleagues. Also, closed captioning is available by clicking on the CC button at the toolbar in the bottom of your screen. Comments and questions are welcome throughout the webinar. If you think of a question at any point, you may add it to Q&A on the Q&A box on your screen, and our panelists will address it either during or at the end of the webinar. And please be sure to complete your evaluation at the end. Your feedback helps us to ensure that we're delivering high quality and effective technical assistance. So who is familiar with DEC recommended practices? You can use an emoji or the chat box to share. Awesome. I see a lot of thumbs up. Great. So then the DEC recommended practices were originally developed in 1991 to help guide the relatively new field of early intervention or early childhood special education. The most recent version was created in 2014 as a collaborative effort between DEC, or Division of Early Childhood, and the Early Childhood Technical Assistance Center, or ECTA. As we all know, putting research into practice can present quite a few challenges. The purpose of the DEC recommended practices is to highlight those practices specifically known to promote outcomes of young children who are at risk or have developmental disabilities, and to support their families in accordance with the DEC NAEYC position statement on early childhood inclusion. Okay, so we know why they were developed, but how did DEC and ECTA determine which practices would become recommended? Each included practice had to meet the following checkpoints in order to be included on the DEC recommended practices. First, they must have highest expected leverage and impact on outcomes, providing essentially the biggest bang for the buck. They must be supported by research, values, and experience. They must represent the breadth of the topic area, which we'll talk a little bit more about in a minute. They must be observable. They cannot be disability specific. They must be able to be delivered in all settings, natural and inclusive environments. They must build on but not duplicate the standards for early childhood settings, such as NAEYC developmentally appropriate practices. It's also important to note that the recommended practices document makes it clear that in addition to implementing DEC recommended practices, practitioners working in the field should be guided by their discipline-specific professional standards, competencies, and code of ethics.
Okay, as Melissa just mentioned, recommended practices encompass all of the topic areas. There are 8 topics which break down the recommended practices. The first is leadership. We know that use of the recommended practices by school district personnel is instrumental in improving outcomes for young children who have or are at risk for developmental delays and disabilities. We also know that their use of these practices can either be supported or constrained by the program, agency, school, or organization for which they work. The second recommended practice topic is assessment. Assessment is the process of gathering information to make decisions and to determine appropriate intervention strategies. For environmental practices refer to more than just the classroom or the buildings in which children are educated. It also includes the materials, interactions, routines, and activities that practitioners and families can intentionally alter to support each child's learning across developmental domains. Family practices refer to ongoing activities that promote the active participation of families in decision-making related to their child, such as assessment, planning, intervention. Also, family practices refer to ongoing activities that lead to the development of a service plan. And also, they support families in achieving the goals that they hold for their child and the other family members. Now we'll hear from Dana for the next 4 recommended practice topics.
As far as instruction, can you hear me right now? Yes, okay. Instruction practices are intentional and systematic strategies to inform what we teach, when we teach, how to evaluate the effects of teaching, and how to support and evaluate the quality of instructional practices implemented by others. The area of interaction looks at sensitive and responsive interactional practices are the foundation for promoting the development of a child's language and cognitive and emotional competence. These interactional practices are the basis for fostering all children's learning. Teaming and collaboration practices are those that promote and sustain collaborative adult partnerships, relationships, and ongoing interactions to ensure that programs and services achieve desired family and child outcomes and goals. Transition refers to the events, activities, and processes associated with key changes between environments or programs during the early childhood years and the practices that support the adjustments of the child and the family to the new setting. These changes occur at the transition from hospital home, the transition into early intervention, Part C programs, the transition out of early intervention to community early childhood programs, and the transition into Part B 619 programs, as well as the transition to kindergarten or school age programs.
Okay, thanks, Dana. So how many of you in the chat, just tell me how many of you have heard about the SPP APR? I want to take a minute to talk about what these are and the purpose that they serve. SPP stands for State Performance Plan. It must be completed by each state receiving funds to implement IDA every 6 years and includes a detailed plan of how the state would like to provide these services. The SPP also contains both compliance and performance indicators of success. Compliance indicators, indicator targets are set by the Office of Special Education, programs, or OSEP, and performance indicators are set by the state. The APR stands for Annual Performance Report. This is an annual report dedicated to evaluating the progress that has been made within the state towards appropriately implementing IDEA services. Both the SPP and the APR rely on data collected throughout the year, including some IDEA Section 618 data, such as the number of children served, educational environments or settings in which the children are receiving services. So you might be wondering how all of these things we discussed go together. Let's connect the dots. Use of the DEC recommended practices facilitates high quality service delivery. When writing their SPP APR, states create a vision and a plan for achieving the best possible outcome for children eligible for IDEA services. Therefore, by providing high quality service delivery, children are more likely to be successful, which results in districts meeting or exceeding their early childhood indicators and their SPP APR. Now I'll pass it on to Dana and she'll tell you a bit more about Indicator 6, preschool LRE.
All right. I'm sorry, let me go back again. Indicator 6, which addresses least restrictive environments, is the first of 3 indicators we will be unpacking and connecting to DEC recommended practices. The DEC recommended practices state that through implementation of the environmental practices, practitioners and families can promote nurturing and responsive caregiving and learning environments that can foster each child's overall health and development. The LRE requirements have existed since the passage of Education for All Handicapped Children's Act, or EHA, in 1975. Take a moment to think about how that year, 1975, connects with your life. Maybe that's before you were even born. Not me. Now that we put that in perspective, we know it's been a part of our education system for 47 years now. Before that law, many children were denied access to education and opportunities to learn. What does LRE, or least restrictive environment, mean? I'm going to read through this portion because it's part of the law and it's important to know word for word. The IDEA, or Individuals with Disabilities Act, state that each public agency must ensure that, to the maximum extent appropriate, children with disabilities, including children in public or private institutions or other care facilities, are educated with children who are non-disabled. In other words, kids who get special education services should be in the same classrooms as other kids as much as possible. In a Dear Colleague letter written by the U.S. Department of Education, it is stated that all young children with disabilities should have access to inclusive, high-quality early childhood programs where they are provided with individualized and appropriate supports to help enable them to meet high expectations. The IDEA's LRE provision does not distinguish between school age and preschool age children, and therefore applies equally to all preschool children with disabilities. Children can learn and grow in environments such as home, public or private schools, childcare, the neighborhood, on a playground, or at the library. The least restrictive environment, or LRE, is not a place. Special ed services are not a place. LRE is a principle that guides a child's education program. The LRE for each child may look different for each child because kids are unique. It's only when the appropriate education cannot be provided with the use of aids and services that a child with disabilities will be placed in a more restrictive setting. As shown here, the LRE also specifies that in the law. The use of aids and services can include accommodations and modifications that must be taught and have an opportunity to be learned. It would be difficult to decide if a child would not be a good fit for a classroom without trying out accommodations and modifications. Rather, we can focus on how to make our programs good fits for all children using evidence-based practices that are stated in DEC recommendations. So what's an environment? According to the DEC recommended practices, environmental practices refer to physical environment, which includes the space, equipment, and materials such as toys, books, puppets, as well as the labels on the shelves and the carpet squares that show children where to sit and the picture schedules that help a child know what happens next. The social environment, which includes the interactions with peers, teachers, therapists, siblings, and family members. The temporal environment, which includes the daily sequence and balance of active movement and focus time, length of routines, keeping children engaged and not sitting too long, indoor and outdoor activities, both teacher and child directed. So there are options. Children ages 3 to 5 can be educated in a school district program or in an early childhood setting in the community with their typically developing peers. A continuum of placement options exists. It's part of the IDEA law. Different school districts may provide different options, so it's important to discuss these with your school district. In all cases, placement decisions must be individually determined on the basis of each child's abilities and needs and each child's IEP, and not solely on factors such as category of disability, severity of disability, availability of special ed and related services, configuration of the service delivery system, availability of space, or administrative convenience. While the number of public and pre-K programs has increased, there has not been a proportionate expansion of inclusive early childhood learning opportunities for young children with disabilities, particularly for 3-year-olds. In these situations, the lead education agency, or the LEA, must explore alternative methods to ensure that LEA requirements are met, including providing opportunities in preschool programs operated by public agencies other than LEAs like Head Start or community-based childcare, enrolling preschool children with disabilities in private preschool programs for non-disabled preschool children, locating classes for preschool children with disabilities in regular public elementary schools, or providing home-based services. So the DEC recommended practices that apply specifically to environments are the following: that practitioners or teachers, paraprofessionals, therapists, administrators, and families work to provide services and supports in natural and inclusive environments during daily routines and activities. Consider universal designs for learning principles to individualize and engage all children. Modify and adapt the physical, social, temporal environments. Identify each needs for assistive technology and acquire and create appropriate assistive technology. Create environments that provide opportunities for movement and regular physical activity to maintain or improve fitness, wellness, and development across domains. These practices promote each child's access and participation in learning experiences. We'll be taking a deeper dive into least restrictive environments on January 31st at 3 o'clock. Now I'm going to hand it over to Ludwika Jones to share a little bit more right after this temperature check. Let's check in and see how you're feeling so far. We have shared some information. We'd like to see how it feels for you at this point. So you can read through the bullet points here, but 1 is completely unsure, uncomfortable, and 4 is feeling very confident. Given the participants, I have a feeling we'll have a lot of 3s and 4s on there, but we'd love to get some feedback from you. 1 through 4 in that chat box for us, please. Awesome. Thank you for your feedback. We really appreciate it. That's great. And it's refreshing that that's so great that you're telling us just where you're at so that we know how to help move the needle forward. All right, so now I'll hand it over to Ludwika Jones.
All right, thank you, Dana. And thank you everyone for your responses to the temperature check. My name is Ladrika Jones, and I am going to go over indicator 7. Okay, indicator 7 is the percentage of preschool children aged 3 to 5, but not yet in kindergarten, children with IEPs who demonstrate improved outcomes during their time in preschool special education. The Division for Early Childhood Recommended Practices states that sensitive and responsive interactional practices are the foundation for promoting the development of a child's language and cognitive and emotional competence. This foundational practice is the basis for all children's learning. For children who have or are at risk for developmental delays or disabilities, they represent a critical set of strategies for fostering children's social, emotional competence, communication, cognitive development, problem solving, autonomy, and persistence. All right, indicator 7, preschool outcomes. As I stated in the previous slide, indicator 7 is the percentage of preschool children aged 3 to 5, but not yet in kindergarten, with IEPs who demonstrate improved outcomes during their time in preschool special education. It monitors the percent of preschool children with IEPs who demonstrate improved A, positive social emotional skills, including social relationships, B, acquisition and use of knowledge and skills, including early language, communication, and early literacy. And C, use of appropriate behaviors to meet their needs. These 3 child outcome areas are the backbone for indicator 7. I will talk about child outcome summary, better known as COS, in the next slide. All right, so what is COS? COS stands for Child Outcome Summary. It summarizes information on the child's functioning in each of the 3 child outcome areas that I just talked about in the previous slide, using a 7-point scale. With the COS process, a team of individuals who are familiar with the child, including the parents, can consider multiple sources of information about his or her functioning, including parent-provider observation and results from direct assessments. So why is the COS important? The COS data is collected by the South Carolina Department of Education from each program throughout the state and transformed into a report given by the U.S. Department of Education, OSCP, which is the Office of Special Education Programs. This report can determine funding amounts, so it's very important. Is anyone familiar with the Child Outcome Summary Form, better known as COSEF? You can simply put yes or no in the chat box. Good, good. I was expecting everyone to say yes on this COSEF. All right, very good. So this first link is the Child Outcome Summary Form. Let's see, Dana, if you can click on that link for me. Thank you. So you are probably very familiar with this form. This is the Child Outcome Summary Form. If you work with preschool age children, you have seen this form. I'm sure you have. There is also a calculator that can help you determine the OES category. Dana, can you click on that? The second one. Okay, so this is a calculator. Did it come up? Okay, there it is. So this is a calculator that the scores that you get on the COSEF form, you could put it in this calculator here on the ECTA website, and it will convert your COS data to OSEP's progress reporting. Okay, so that calculator, there it is right there. Thank you, Dana. You input your scores there and it will convert to the OES category, the Office of Education Services. And Dana did put the link in the chat box. So Melissa, thank you so much for that. So you can access these links and they are in the chat box. Okay, so next, what would it look like if a child is meeting the targets? And this could be outside of the classroom, inside of the classroom. These are some indicators that might show you that a child is meeting the targets. In the orange circle, we have positive social emotional skills, including social relationships. The child will consistently display relating with adults, relating with other children, and following rules related to group or interacting with others if they're older than 18 months. In the middle aqua colored circle, we will look for a child's acquiring and using knowledge and skills. Think about the child's functioning in these and closely related areas. The child will consistently display thinking, reasoning, remembering, and problem solving, understanding symbols, understanding the physical and social worlds. In the yellow circle, we will look for a child to take appropriate actions to meet their needs. Think about the child's functioning in these closely related areas. The child will display taking care of their basic needs, such as showing hunger, dressing, feeding, toileting, those kinds of things. Contributing to their own health and safety, such as following the rules, assist with hand washing, and also getting from place to place, mobility, and using tools appropriately, such as forks, stringing attached objects, things like that. So these are some ways that you can tell if a child is meeting the targets. Okay. Indicator 7, child outcomes timeline. Now, this is a lot of information. There's many different ways to, there's many different timelines to adhere to, but just as a little breakdown here, the COS have different timelines for completion. The entry COS should be submitted for data entry within 15 business days of the eligibility determination, or 30 days if the child has transferred to the LEA. The entry COS should be submitted within 15 days. The exit COS is for preschool to kindergarten. The exit COS needs to be completed when the student exits Part B services because they're no longer eligible. The student may move out of district or move out of state. If a student is deceased, or just before the student enters kindergarten, that's when the exit COS needs to be done. But all students who have an entry COS must have an exit COS. So that's very important. There are many different guidelines and timeline dates depending on specific information and situations. More information will be shared with the Indicator 7 webinar in January. So look forward to that coming up in January for more information. Okay, so what DEC recommended practices can help meet this indicator? Leaders collaborate with stakeholders to collect and use data for program management and continuous program improvement, and to examine the effectiveness of services and supports in improving child and family outcomes. Practitioners will need to plan instructional practices that are specific to the child's development and need in their level. The DEC recommends practices that align with Indicator 7 for A7, which is practitioners obtain information about the child's skills in early activities, routines, and environments such as home, center, and community. I will now hand this over to Melissa to talk about Indicator 12.
Thanks, Ladrika. Okay, so moving on to Indicator 12, which is early childhood transition. That is the percentage of children referred by Part C prior to age 3 who are found eligible for Part B and who have an IEP developed and implemented by their 3rd birthday. Wow, that's a mouthful, right? So let's talk a little bit about what transition is. So transition refers to events and activities and processes associated with key changes between environments or programs during early childhood years and the practices that support the adjustment. So not just the transition, but how that transition is supported. Like she mentioned earlier, it starts with leaving the hospital and going home. That's a big transition. The next would be transitioning into early intervention or Part C programs. And then the transition out of early intervention to either community early childhood programs or Part B 619. And then finally, they transition into kindergarten. And that's early childhood transitions now, because they transition a lot more, we all do, throughout our lives. But today, specifically, we're going to focus on Part C, early intervention, which is birth to 3, and that transition into preschool, Part B 619, which is 3 to 5. Okay, so this is going to feel a little bit overwhelming. It's a lot of language. I typically don't put this much language on my slides, but this is developed by NECTEC, and I wanted you to have all this information because it does have the timeline. So you can see at the bottom, 2 years, 3 months, 2 years, 9 months, and 3 years. And it kind of talks through the different steps within the process, orange being Part C responsibilities and blue being Part B responsibilities. And so it starts with the transition notification. So this is not like a one and done kind of thing. It spans over the course of the entire second year of life. So transition notification comes first, and that is directory information that automatically goes from Part C programs to the LEA to let them know that a child may need services. It includes the child's name, the parent's name, date of birth, address, and telephone number, and it does not require parental consent. The IDEA or Part C office is responsible for sending those to the Department of Education and the LEA for the following age groups during the previous month. So they send it at 24 months, 30 months, 33 months, and over 34.5 if a child's referred late. The next step is the transition referral form, and that is a written referral to the LEA between 27 months and 33 months of age for all IDEA Part C eligible children. And the EI is responsible for sending that. So the early interventionist or service coordinator, they send the transition referral form for those children before 33 months of age to the appropriate LEA or community preschool provider. If a child comes into BabyNet between 33 and 34.5 months, then the intake coordinator for BabyNet is responsible for sending that transition referral. And then if they come in between 34.5 and 36 months of age, the referral team will give them the contact information for the LEA, but no actual transition referral form is sent. So they do their best to cover their bases and make sure that none of those kiddos fall through the cracks, regardless of what time they come in. The next step would be the transition conference, and that's a meeting convened by Part C with the LEA for children who are potentially eligible for Part B services. Again, Part C personnel are responsible for scheduling and facilitating the transition conference, including the prior written notice to the family and the LEA or community school provider. It's important to mention that this is an indicator for Part C as well. So they will still hold this meeting if the LEA is not in attendance. The LEA should be invited and also attend all transition conferences. And transition conferences can be completed by phone, face-to-face, or other technology. The transition conference must be held between 27 and 33 months of age for all children determined eligible. And the attendees would be the parents, the Part C service coordinator, an advocate if the family, or if another family member if the family requests that, and the persons involved in evaluation and assessment, as well as LEA providers. The next step, as you can see, is kind of where that switch over from Part C responsibility to Part B responsibility takes place. And so the initial evaluation and eligibility determination, those are conducted by Part B 619 personnel after the transition conference, and they must be completed prior to the child's 3rd birthday. This does require parental consent to be able to complete the evaluation, and it must be completed within 60 days of receiving that consent. And we all know what comes next. That would be the IEP, or individual education plan. So that has to be developed within 30 days of the eligibility determination and prior to the child's 3rd birthday. It must also be implemented prior to the child's 3rd birthday. So it's not enough to have it just written up. You need to be ready to roll with those services prior to that child's 3rd birthday. If a child turns 3 during the summer and the child doesn't qualify for ESY or extended school year services, then the special education and related services may begin in the new school year. So as you can see, ensuring that the IEP is developed and implemented by the child's 3rd birthday is a very involved process, right? And it requires a great deal of collaboration between Part C and Part B to be successful. It's also important to note that the SPP APR that we talked about earlier, that those indicators surrounding transition exist in both Part C and Part B. So I have a question for y'all. It should pop up on your screen, and if you guys would just take a minute and let us know what percentage you think, yeah, Dana, okay. We're giving you answers here. What percentage of compliance is needed to meet this indicator? That's a freebie because it's the end of the day, guys. Look at y'all. Awesome. All right. Thank you. Thank you. All right. So let's move on and see what our answer is. I'm going to share the results because everybody got it. It is a compliance indicator, and it is set with a performance target of 100%. I'm going to close this. Sorry, I'm trying to close this poll so I can't see it. There we go. All right, so there's no wiggle room on this one, right? Indicator 12 is compliance indicator. It's set by OSEP. It's 100%, guys. That means that every single child who ages out of Part C services and is eligible for Part B 619 services must have an IEP developed and implemented by their 3rd birthday, with little to no exceptions. There are very few valid reasons for delay. I listed them here. If a parent revokes consent to evaluate prior to that 60 calendar days. This one's more of a virtual setting for when, COVID was rampant. So a parent repeatedly fails to produce the child for evaluation, or if Part C sends the referral late. Transition referral should occur 90 days prior to the 3rd birthday. Now, one of the things that you may run into is kids don't stop turning 3 over the summer, right? They don't stop turning 3 at Christmas. In fact, some of their birthdays are on Christmas. Unfortunately, holiday and seasonal breaks, weekends, COVID-19, and waiting for maybe an OT or a hearing or vision evaluation are not considered valid reasons for delay pertaining to this indicator. So you can really see why having strong professional relationships with Part C personnel and clear, timely processes within your district is so important. Okay, so what do DEC recommended practices look like in preschool transition? So you have your transition indicator, well, not indicator, recommended practice 1, sorry. In practitioners in sending, receiving program exchange information before, during, and after transition about practices most likely to support the child's successful adjustment and positive outcomes. I can't talk today. Must be a Monday, right? So supporting active communication between those persons involved in the transition from Part C early intervention to Part B preschool services. It could also mean active communication with a parent or other child care provider. In most cases, those people, the persons providing care, have pertinent knowledge pertaining to what that child likes, what they dislike, what their strengths are, any challenges that they face. And sharing that information can assist the child with adjusting to their new preschool environment and teachers, and that would positively affect their outcomes. As we know, children and adults alike feel more comfortable and confident in an environment where they feel understood. And so confidence can go a long way in developing a lifelong love of learning. Transition recommended practice 2 is that practitioners use a variety of planned and timely strategies with the child and family before, during, and after transition to support successful adjustment and positive outcomes for both the child and the family. So we're creatures of habit. Change can create feelings of fear and anxiety in all of us. And when people are unsure of what that change will look like, that anxiety can be kind of overwhelming. I mean, I'm thinking like flashbacks of 2020 here. It's critical that both the family and the child are well informed of and supported through this process. And it's critical that both early intervention personnel and preschool personnel plan and communicate effectively with one another, as well as the family, to ensure a smooth transition. Although all Part B systems must meet the same state and federal requirements, the process for how those requirements are met in South Carolina can vary from district to district. If a child's receiving Part C services, it's recommended that you build a strong relationship with the local EI providers in your area. This will ensure that the EI is aware of how your district implements the transition steps to eliminate any bumps in the road and ensure that the family has a clear understanding of what to expect during this process. This is a lot of information, am I right? Let's take a minute to look at an example of what this would look like. Take a moment, sit back, use your imagination, and imagine this little guy right here. He was so cute, I had to put him in our presentation. But I'm going to read you a scenario, and I'm going to read it because I don't know if I could remember it all from from memory. But Johnny has been receiving early intervention services since he was a year old. In that time, he's built a strong rapport with his early interventionist, and she's had the time to get to know him and what methods of service delivery are most effective to him as an individual. Johnny's getting ready to turn 3 and age out of early intervention. Johnny's family is very nervous about the transition. Their EI has been coming to their home weekly for the past 2 years to see Johnny and work to get all of his services set up for him. Now Johnny will be leaving home to attend preschool and possibly riding a bus to and from school. The EI and the preschool transition coordinator have been communicating regularly, and the EI has provided the most current development information with parental consent. The preschool transition coordinator has brought this information to the IEP team and the classroom teacher. The classroom teacher is able to utilize the information provided by the early interventionist to ensure the most positive experience for both the child and the family to ease their fears and make them feel comfortable with this new transition. Additionally, the classroom teacher and other school staff will be able to use this information to jumpstart their rapport with Johnny and address his needs as an individual. Johnny loves coming to preschool each morning, and he walks into his classroom with a big smile and 2 thumbs up. His teachers and his family are amazed at each day at the progress he is making in his new environment. Johnny has experienced a successful transition to preschool. And that's what we want, right? That's exactly what we want, is for kids to feel confident and comfortable, and families to feel confident and comfortable, so that we can make progress, because we all got into this field to help the little ones. So with that being said, I'm going to turn it over to questions.
And Melissa, I'll jump in because we did get a question.
Melissa, we do have, oh, I'm sorry. We do have a question in the
Okay.
chat box. It says, what about kiddos who transfer to our district? Previous district did not complete the evaluation, and we only have 2 weeks before the third birthday. Not really part C in sending late.
Okay, so that's a really good question. And I want to make sure that I give you the exact correct answer, Michelle. So I want to talk with our Part C 619 coordinator and see if we can get you exactly what you should do in that situation. I know that we can talk about all the general things that occur, but there's always exceptions to the rule. Does anybody else have any questions they would like to ask? I see I have a question regarding indicator 7. Do you feel comfortable asking your question here, or would you like us to contact you individually? Okay, she said she's trying to type it.
We will post a PDF of the PowerPoint presentation afterwards, and that'll be available to everybody here. And I believe it'll be on the website, correct, Carrie? Is that right?
We'll have the link to the recording on the website, but anyone who attended will have that list and we can send that PDF to you. And then you can feel free to share it with others.
And don't forget to, Dana, if you want to click over to the next one while we're waiting, the next slide talks about each session. So next session in January, we will focus on indicator 6, preschool LRE. So what we will do is take those indicators and the recommended practices and unpack how those can go together. And then the indicator 7, early childhood outcomes, will be in February 28th, and early childhood transitions will be March 29th.
And then I don't want to jump the gun because I know, Ladrika, you're going to provide the link for feedback, but I see people hopping off. So I want to make sure, don't hop off just yet and get that link to provide feedback, because if there's something that you really want to know about any of these indicators or the DEC recommended practices, put that on the feedback so we can incorporate it into our upcoming offerings.
I'm going to go ahead and drop that in the chat box right now.
Thank you, Ladrika. Okay, so on the LEA profile, indicator 7 measures the percent of children who substantially increased in the rate of growth. How does OSIS is 1 point score increase? Okay, so if we're talking about indicator 7, those targets are set by the state. So they come together and they make a determination of what their goal is for that year. I think I'm understanding your question correctly, but I will reach out to you to make sure. Dana, yes. This is our information, how you can reach each of us. So if you have a question, or if you feel like we didn't answer your question fully, I know I have a couple of outstanding ones that came up, but if you want to reach out to us, we would love to hear from you. Also, please, please, please make sure that you fill out our evaluation form. Thank you for joining us today for the overview, and don't hesitate to reach out. We hope you have a wonderful afternoon.
Yeah, and I'll just echo what Melissa said. If you feel like you have more questions or we weren't able to give you a concrete answer, definitely don't be shy. We will look into those questions and get the response for you. If for some reason you don't hear from us, you've got the contact information right in front of you.